Imagine a land completely hidden away at the very roof of the world. A rugged, landlocked frontier where ancient empires literally collided, where the echoes of the Silk Road still whisper through these incredibly deep mountain valleys, and where a totally unique culture has somehow survived centuries of conquest, redrawn borders, and devastating conflict. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a cinematic journey into a nation that remains a total mystery to a lot of people, Tajikistan. We're going to peel back the layers of its intense geography, its historic scars, and its absolutely resilient spirit.
To really wrap your head around Tajikistan, you've got to understand its geography. 90%. Let that sink in. More than 90% of this entire nation is covered by skyscraping mountains. It's actually the smallest nation in Central Asia by area, but what it lacks in flatland, it absolutely makes up for in sheer, dizzying verticality. And this geography isn't just a pretty backdrop. It's the defining feature that has completely shaped the country's isolation, its defense, and its economy for millennia.
And when we say mountains, we are talking about the Pamir Range, often called the roof of the world. The scale here is just staggering. We're talking about peaks like the Ismail Somani, towering at 7,495 meters above sea level. These imposing natural fortresses literally isolate the country from its neighbors: China to the east, Afghanistan to the south, Uzbekistan to the west, and Kyrgyzstan to the north. In fact, Tajikistan is separated from Pakistan by just this narrow, super rugged strip of Afghanistan known as the Wakhan Corridor. This intense geography has essentially incubated a very specific ancient culture.
Section 1. An ancient Persian legacy, an anomaly in a Turkic region.
So Tajikistan is actually a demographic anomaly in Central Asia. While all the surrounding Stan nations are predominantly Turkic in their ethnic and linguistic heritage, Tajikistan represents this island of an Iranian demographic majority. Let's trace how that happened. The region's recorded history stretches all the way back to 500 BC when it was part of the Persian Achaemenid Empire and was even later conquered by Alexander the Great. But the absolutely crucial point here is the year 819 AD with the rise of the Samanid Empire. The Samanids firmly established Persian culture and Sunni Islam in the region. They turned cities like Bukhara and Samarkand into massive global hubs of culture, literature, and Islamic architecture. And the fascinating part? Even when Turkic rulers like the Karakhanids took over in 999 AD, the deeply rooted Perso-Arab Muslim culture of the region just assimilated the conquerors. It preserved the Persian essence of the people.
And this brilliantly illustrates the complex origins of the people themselves. The very word Tajik actually comes from the Middle Persian Tazik, which originally referred to an Arab tribe that migrated to the region in the 7th century. Over time, that term evolved to describe the Persian-speaking inhabitants. These were the people of the ancient Silk Road. They weren't just nomads, They were the essential facilitators of global trade, farmers, renowned glassmakers, and merchants directly connecting the East and the West.
Section 2. Scars of the Soviet Era. Drawing borders, erasing ties.
Now, history is rarely a straight line. During the 19th century's Great Game, the Russian Empire pushed hard into Central Asia. Following the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks fought a really brutal 4-year war against local resistance fighters known as the Basmachi, eventually bringing the whole region under total Soviet control. In 1924, Soviet authorities created the Tajik Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic, initially placing it right inside Uzbekistan. Now, here is a massive historical turning point. When those borders were drawn, the historic cultural capitals of the Tajik people, Bukhara and Samarkand, were left completely outside of Tajikistan, trapped inside Uzbekistan. Instead, a tiny mountain town of about 1,000 residents named Dushanbe was designated as the new capital. By 1929, Tajikistan was elevated to a full Soviet Socialist Republic, but its geographic and cultural centers had been fundamentally severed.
And that Soviet social engineering, well, it didn't stop at physical borders. The authorities deliberately sought to cut the Tajik people off from the broader Persian-speaking world, places like Iran and Afghanistan. They took the local Persian dialect, officially renamed it Tajiki, and literally forced a change in the alphabet, first to Latin in 1928 and then to Cyrillic in 1940. This move effectively cut the entire population off from centuries of historical Persian literature and heritage, steering Soviet Tajikistan onto an entirely distinct, manufactured cultural path.
Section 3. Independence and Civil War. A nation fractured.
As the Soviet Union began to collapse, nationalism surged, leading to independence in September 1991. But almost immediately, the nation plunged into a devastating civil war. This was driven by regional and clan-based loyalties that had just been simmering beneath the surface of Soviet rule. The toll of this conflict, which lasted from 1992 to 1997, was staggering. An estimated 100,000 people lost their lives. The war tore the fabric of the newly independent nation apart, leaving roughly 1.2 million people displaced as refugees, fleeing persecution and deep poverty. The peace agreement they eventually reached was a huge milestone, but make no mistake, the trauma of those years heavily dictates how the country is governed today.
Emerging from the sheer chaos of those early Civil War years was Emomali Rahman. He took power in 1992, officially became president in 1994, and he has remained in power ever since.
Let's look at the political reality of Rahman's government today. According to the Economist Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index, Tajikistan ranks 160th and is designated as an authoritarian regime. The post-war landscape is defined by a government that is highly risk-averse. The state is constitutionally secular, despite 97.5% of the population being Muslim. To combat perceived radicalism, the state heavily regulates religious practice, and this goes to extremes, including police reportedly forcibly shaving the beards of thousands of men and actively discouraging women from wearing hijabs, labeling these practices as alien to Tajik culture. On top of that, independent media faces strict censorship and restrictions.
Section 4. Power, aluminum, and remittances. An economy in transition.
So, how does a landlocked, mountainous country with a tightly controlled political system actually survive economically? Well, in recent years, a staggering 29% of the country's entire GDP has come from remittances. At times in the past decade, that number has been as high as 49%. That makes it one of the most remittance-dependent economies on the planet. This money comes primarily from millions of Tajik citizens, mostly men, who leave their families behind to work abroad, predominantly as migrant laborers in Russia. Because of this, the economy is deeply vulnerable to external shocks from the Russian economy.
But right within the country's own borders lies a really stark paradox. On one hand, Tajikistan's geography gives it incredible hydroelectric potential. It's home to the Nurek Dam, literally the second highest dam in the world, harnessing the immense power of those mountain rivers. Yet, despite this massive infrastructure and energy wealth, widespread poverty persists. Estimates have shown that about 47% of the population lives on less than $1.25 a day. They face high rates of food insecurity and malnutrition, especially out in those harsh, remote, mountainous regions.
Beyond migrant labor, the domestic economy basically leans on a few key pillars. First, there's the state-owned Tajik Aluminum Company, which is actually the largest aluminum plant in Central Asia. Then there's agriculture, which is completely dominated by cotton. Cotton alone eats up 45% of the country's arable land. And then there is the shadow economy. Because of its long, porous border with Afghanistan, Tajikistan is a major transit route for illicit drug trafficking heading toward Russian and European markets. It's an ongoing, massive issue that the government and international agencies are continually battling.
Section 5. The Resilient Tajik Spirit. Culture Amidst the Mountains.
Now, the story of Tajikistan isn't just about harsh geography or economic struggle. It is a profound picture of true endurance. Up in the northern mountains, there's a small community of about 25,000 people known as the Yagnobi. Despite forced migrations during the Soviet era that absolutely decimated their numbers, they survived. And astonishingly, they still speak the Yagnobi language. It is the last living direct descendant of the ancient Sogdian language spoken on the Silk Road over a millennia ago. It's quite literally a living time capsule.
And the broader Tajik culture is just incredibly vibrant. It's a society that values both physical prowess and intellectual tradition. The national sport is Guchki-giri, which is a really fierce form of traditional wrestling. Then there's buzkashi. This is an intense polo-like game played on horseback where riders literally fight over a 50-kilogram goat carcass. It is a wild, true spectacle of equestrian skill. On the artistic side, women preserve the intricate, colorful art of chakan embroidery, carefully passing it down through generations. And remember that poverty we discussed earlier? Well, despite that, Tajikistan boasts an exceptionally high literacy rate of 99.8%.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Tajikistan is a place of intense, almost unbelievable contrasts. It's a nation physically walled off by the highest mountains on Earth, scarred by imperial conquests and civil war, yet sustained by ancient traditions and an incredibly resilient population. As the 21st century unfolds, shifting regional powers and a heavy reliance on external economies are really going to test this country. So the big question remains, how does a nation so isolated by geography and so heavily burdened by its history carve out its future on the roof of the world? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating topic with me. I hope this explainer helped you grasp the hidden depths of Tajikistan.